Welcome, everyone. I'm more than happy to welcome you to today's presentation of the CURC webinar series entitled Essential Workers as Essential Voices. My name is Eric Halverson. I'm the program coordinator for the College and University Recycling Coalition, and I will be your moderator for today. For those of you not familiar with CURC, the College and University Recycling Coalition is a member-based organization who works to grow collegiate recycling and waste reduction efforts by fostering technical information exchange and networking opportunities between the staff and student leaders implementing programs on college and university campuses. Today's program is part of our free CURC webinar series, which is designed to highlight innovative campus programs and provide trends and perspectives on a broad range of operational and educational topics related to collegiate recycling and sustainable materials management. So today's program is the fourth webinar in our 2021 series. Thank you so much for being here. Now, before we get started, we have a few housekeeping notes to go over. If you have problems with your audio or video during the webinar, we recommend you visit support.zoom.us to troubleshoot any technical issues you might have. And also, to avoid background noise, we placed all but our panelists' lines on mute. We encourage you to submit questions at any time, however, by using the Q&A section of the Zoom dashboard below. We will read as many of these as possible out loud to our speakers at the end of each presentation. Copies of today's presentation slides will be available to download, and a recording of this session available to stream within the next day or so on the CURC website, which is www.curc3r.org. That's CURC3r.org, or on our YouTube channel, which you can find just by searching CURC. All right. CURC has always been a great mix of different perspectives coming together on college campuses, whether it's facilities, staff, sustainability offices, or students, administrators. Wherever you are coming from, CURC is a place we can all come together around managing waste and always learning together, especially after we've experienced a pandemic where essential workers need to keep things functioning and stay safe and continue to need to stay safe today. CURC thought of this program as a way to explore ways essential workers are heard for their own benefit and the greater waste program's benefit as well. We are excited to welcome two different case studies in this process, whether it's a system to meet and discuss working together or innovative surveys and feedback systems. You'll be able to learn some great things from these two programs. Now, first we'll hear from Jennifer Maxwell from Appalachian State University and their structure between the Office of Sustainability, the physical plant, all their students on campus. And after that, we will welcome Daniel Chow from UC San Francisco to hear about their use of technology, to share feedback between essential workers and administrators overseeing their collection on campus. All right, now first I'll introduce App State. Jennifer has been with Appalachian State University since 2006, and she leads many of their campus sustainability programs, including the University Zero Waste Commitment, the Mountaineer Food Hub and Free Store, the Green Suite, which is a collection of programs designed to engage the campus community in efforts to incorporate more sustainable practices in their workplace and personal lives, sustainable purchasing, the sustainability film series, and sustainable event planning. She is the chair of the Collegiate Recyclers Coalition of North and South Carolina, and also serves as the chair for the board of directors of the College and University Recycling Coalition, CURC. She studied and received her Bachelor's of Science in Sustainable Technology in 2001, and a Master's in Higher Education, University Leadership in 2017, both from Appalachian. So welcome, Jen.
Thank you, Eric, so much. And thank you for just that introduction. And Daniel, looking forward to presenting with you today and hearing from you as well. I'm going to share my screen really quickly. All right, see that okay? Okay, so I am going to talk a little bit today about our Zero Waste Leadership Team, which we lovingly call ZWALT. So if you hear me refer to ZWALT throughout this presentation, that's what I'll be talking about. I thought, I'd start with just a little bit, just a second. Here we go. Just a little bit of history of App State, or just a little bit of information about App State. I won't read through all of this, but we are a rural mountain campus in North Carolina, and we have a little over 20,000 students, 375 acres of land developed, 30 academic buildings, 20 res halls, 3 dining facilities, and 11 recreational facilities. So I just wanted to share a little bit so you could see, and then lovely photo of what it looks like here in Boone, North Carolina. It's a lovely place. All right, a little history. I thought, so because, as Eric mentioned when he introduced me, I've been here for a really long time now. This is my 15th year. And so I wanted to go through a little bit of history, just because I think a lot of it sort of lent itself to the development of this leadership team. And so I thought I'd go through really quickly. I'm not going to read through all this, but I just wanted to explain. So I started here at App State in 2006 as the resource conservation manager. And at the time, we had a separate waste reduction and recycling office within facilities. And our sustainability office was developed around 2008. And so we had, when I was in that facilities position, I was part of the Sustainability Council and kind of helped to create the vision for that sustainability office. So my position coordinated with that office through a few years, and then eventually kind of transitioned over to the Office of Sustainability. And so, and I went from really kind of digging deep within operations to a much more holistic view of zero waste and what that looks like. Our recycling and composting were kind of absorbed into our landscaping and environmental services, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then our indoor collection went to our housekeeping, outdoor collections was to landscaping, composting went to landscaping. So just a lot of transition that happened that I think really lent itself to the creation of this leadership team and the need for it as those transitions happened. And so around 2012 is when we made a commitment to zero waste as a university. And around 2013, we started implementing some of our more downstream strategies. So removing trash cans from the classrooms, and we went to a mini bin system. We went to centralized collection sites. We did some color coding and stuff like that. So all of that was kind of happening as this group was being developed. So I just wanted to kind of go through that a little bit. I think that could be a little bit unique in the fact that I sort of transitioned from one space to the other as it was created. So when we were making these transitions, it was really important for us to have input from all of our crew members and team lead supervisors. And so our environmental services is our housekeeping team. So what we did was we appointed 4 supervisors to a committee for all of the planning of this transition. And then 6 additional housekeeping staff were part of these groups as well. But in addition to that, so we met probably monthly at the time throughout this transition, and those 10 people were always at the table. We also participated in some focus groups with every housekeeper. And then in addition, at the same time that we were making these changes, we were doing zero waste training for our entire housekeeping staff. So we made sure that we were connecting with each and every housekeeper. And I'll talk a little bit later about the benefits of that. With landscape services as well, I mentioned, so we kind of dissolved waste reduction and recycling. My position transitioned over, but then we sort of recreated some of these positions within landscaping. So we had a recycling coordinator position that was kind of managing the operational aspects of recycling and composting. And then we had a few collections team members that were developed to assist with these collections. So at the time we had 1 recycling coordinator and 3 collections team members. Those members were doing all the outside collection, while environmental services, who I mentioned before, were handling all the interior. And prior to our transition, that waste reduction and recycling office that I managed, there was only 4 collections team members at the time, and they were collecting all of the recycling in all of the buildings. So one of the great things about that transition, especially within housekeeping, was that we went from 4 people collecting recycling in every building to about 85 people doing collections inside. So it really kind of freed up, a lot of time and effort, especially when we transitioned to the mini bin system and people were responsible for kind of emptying their own containers and stuff. If we were really able to become much more efficient, it made a lot more sense. Part of the transition within landscaping as well was to develop a compost operations coordinator position. And that was that position was developed in this same process. And that includes not only the management of our compost facility, but management of the permitting process and the state reporting, because we're required to report to the state of North Carolina. And so there's some permitting requirements and reporting requirements annually there. These positions played roles throughout this, the commitment, as well as the transition. And we also did some focus groups with every landscape position within our landscaping shop. So they've always had a voice in the, in these transitions and these developments of these commitments around zero waste. So that brings me to the leadership team and who participates in that. So when we developed this, one of the things about the transition for my role specifically was that when we transitioned over to the sustainability officer, when I did, our responsibility would be around all, like kind of the visionary and holistic approach to zero waste, but also all of the outreach associated with it. So that was another reason for us to develop this team, this sort of leadership team that was meeting regularly. We meet every 2 weeks. We currently still do that. We started out maybe not as often, and we found that it really made a lot more sense to meet more often. So we went from meeting every month to every 2 weeks. But from our office, my role is participates, and over the years, we've also developed a sustainability outreach director position. So that position is also a part of the leadership team. From facilities, we have our director of campus services, and they are over motor pool, landscaping, environmental services. And so they're kind of the senior management for those 3 areas. Within that, we also have our landscape services director, our facilities superintendent, both of those are under landscaping, our environmental services director, which is our housekeeping, the recycling coordinator that I mentioned on the slide before, and then our compost operations coordinator are all representatives from facilities. We also have a supervisor from university housing. As you can imagine, a lot of our recycling and composting efforts are happening within the residence halls. And so we team up a lot with university housing and residence life. And then we have some project specific members that will come on board when it comes to a particular project. So I'll talk a little bit more about that, but campus dining, university recreation, athletics, our student affairs, our convocation, all of those have more specific projects related to zero waste that they participate in at different times throughout the year. So I wanted to touch on the campus dining because that's a huge one for us. That's real project specific, but we work really closely with campus dining, and that's another way that we've really kind of tapped into the voices of our essential workers there. So we have done a lot of collaborative planning with our management team and staff, specifically back of house and front of house employees and management for the different dining halls on campus. We have done zero waste training for these different staff. And also, especially within the dish room, we've done specific compost training. And then we are certainly always working together to coordinate our outreach efforts at the beginning of each semester. And so we, like I said, work really closely with the teams there, and it really allows for a much smoother process when it comes to kind of rolling out these different initiatives. So what's the focus of ZWALT? So we focus on a lot of different things, and I'll just run through some here, some that we're working on and some that we are kind of new that this team will be involved with. Any of our waste reduction efforts that we're doing on campus, we're kind of running through this team, and always allows us the opportunity to kind of be on the same page with everyone. Anything that has to do with recycling operations or outreach, as well as composting operations or outreach, whether we're expanding these programs or we're adding a new sort to the program, maybe it's plastic film recycling, or we're expanding our composting to the residence halls. Any of those types of decisions are made through this leadership team. Our zero waste stadium efforts certainly are a part of this process, and then we pull in athletics as needed. Move in is a pretty big deal around here when it comes to, especially to cardboard recycling, and so a lot of effort there, not only on the sort of upstream, trying to get people to bring a lot less to campus. So we really try to work with Housing and Residence Life to get the word out about bringing less to campus, packing in reusable containers and things like that, but also on that downstream, just really capturing all that cardboard and making sure that recycling education is happening from the get-go. Move out and donation collections and things like that. We have a pretty extensive program here, so we're part of that. And then some of the newer things that we're working on, we have a pretty large team of sustainability ambassadors that are students that work in our office, but they are, we've expanded this year to have a specific zero waste leadership team, or a ambassador team, sorry. And that'll be 5 students that are really working a lot more hands-on with zero waste efforts. So they'll be doing education in the dining halls, they'll be working zero waste stadium, they'll be doing some waste auditing in specific buildings and doing some targeted outreach in that way. So that will all be kind of managed through this team. Our sustainable purchasing plan is a large sustainable purchasing plan for the entire university. And so obviously this group will be a part of that. And then we're also in the process of developing a green labs program. So certainly the purchasing and waste aspects of those will be running through this leadership team, as well as others. So what are some of the benefits of this type of team is really kind of creating a better understanding. There's certainly a mutual respect for one another. There's collective buy-in. Everyone's needs are, voices are heard and needs are covered. And with strategic planning, you already have kind of this developed committee or team, if you will, that can really sort of be on the same page, and you don't have to feel like you're sort of recreating a committee every time you develop a plan. Same with program development and contract management. It's when we put out RFPs and things like that, we have this group already kind of ready to go to really kind of vet and look through this stuff. Targeted outreach is another thing. So we are always on the same page with outreach. So when there's issues in a building, our housekeeping staff, our landscaping staff, they're immediately letting this team know. And we're able to focus on outreach in specific areas. So that's a really great benefit for us and for our outreach director as well. And then timely follow-up, again, just because we have this team already developed, there's always somebody really kind of thinking about zero waste all the time, both upstream and downstream. All right, so I'm going to stop there. I know that was a lot to run through really quickly, but just wanted to stop and check in with Eric. I'm not sure if we're doing questions now or at the end, but I'll stop there. Thank you so much.
We can take some questions now. We've got some coming in, so thank you, Jen. For everyone who wants to ask a question, please use the Q&A section of the Zoom dashboard, and we will get to as many as we can in the time that we have today. So the first one comes through, it's a bigger question about like the influence of the group, about the leadership team. Are the decisions essentially democratic, or does one group have more influence over the others? And when push comes to shove, how do you defer different decisions on different issues?
Good question. I think it certainly, what I will say about, and I failed to mention this in the presentation, but our sustainability office reports directly to the chancellor's division. And so I think, when it comes to decision-making is certainly democratic, but at the same time, we do have this university-wide commitment that we are getting support and enforcement from the top, I guess is the best way to put that. And so, but I will give an example of, that decision-making, especially when it came to the pandemic. We had to transition to all takeout. And so, the cost associated with that was fairly astronomical. And that really could mean jobs and positions in the future. And so there's a lot of uncertainty around the pandemic. So the decision to transition away from compostable to-goes to styrofoam was vetted through this leadership team all the way up to the chancellor's decision. And we had to make the decision to transition back to styrofoam, which was not taken very lightly. But at the same time, it was a monetary decision. And like I said, it really meant could mean positions and potential layoffs in the future. It was about a $300 difference in cost, $300,000, difference in cost. And so I give that example because I think, certainly the campus dining budget and the decisions that were made there were heard loud and clear, as well as our environmental health, safety, emergency management, and health department. And so I think all voices are heard for the most part, but certainly we have a lot of support and top-down support for this, as well as kind of grassroots support. We definitely have a sustainability culture within our students here as well. So hopefully that answers the question a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I understand, especially in unique times, you have to make unique decisions. But so the decision to switch, was that kind of suggested by the chancellor, or was it suggested by staff after being told that positions could be threatened if a change wasn't made?
It was suggested kind of by middle management, I'd say, the best way to put it there, and certainly those that were looking at the decisions around the budgets.
Okay.
And again, that's a really unique,
yeah,
idea. But I think, when I mentioned that it was, not taken lightly, even though they kind of made that decision, it was the decision itself and the discussion around it went all the way up to the chancellor herself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Moving on to getting that input, one of the groups people are curious about is housekeeping. Is housekeeping employed by the university, and what topics you cover with them? And is there any difficulty getting buy-in sometimes from people who might not be under the sustainability umbrella, talking about zero waste?
Yes, absolutely. So we do employ our own housekeeping staff. So that's part of it's not contracted out. And there's a lot of benefit to that, as well. So our dining is the same way. And so a lot of kind of customer service benefit. And when we do those focus groups and we did the zero waste training, we certainly had some people that were more bought in than others. I feel like in a lot of ways, we did a lot of work around just kind of identifying sustainability and what it means. And we spent a lot of time really trying to connect sustainability to kind of resourcefulness and frugality and neighborliness and what does sustainability really mean? And so I think that when we worked to really kind of define it in that way, on kind of terms that the culture here, so a lot of our housekeeping staff are local mountain culture and have lived here all their lives. So this culture here historically is resourceful, frugal, very neighborly. And so I think when we were able to really kind of connect it in that way, the buy-in became much more. And also really trying to connect it in a way of, especially with the recycling as a resource and composting as a resource. There certainly was more buy-in that way, but things that we cover, was in the planning process was really trying to look at, what was the most efficient and effective way for them to do their collections within the buildings and how we might be able to help influence that. So a lot of the planning that we did came from their ideals. So, the color coding and the types of containers that we use. We do clear bags for recycling. You know, a lot of these different things were things that we heard from them that they needed in order to do their jobs very effectively. And so I think once they knew that their ideals were being used and heard, then that buy-in increased as well. You know, even with the transition to the mini bin system. So basically what that is, just to make sure everybody knows, we took everybody's trash cans out of their offices, gave them a large recycling bin, a really tiny trash can, did a lot of education campus-wide about the mini bin system and what it means and how we can reduce our waste stream. And really, we don't have a lot to go to the landfill. And then we put in centralized recycling sites, kind of like you see in this picture here, but that's outdoor, but the color-coded, and all faculty and staff became responsible for emptying their own containers into these centralized sites. So that was really a huge efficiency measure for housekeeping. And so obviously that was a real benefit to them, not to have to go individual office by office by office. And so I think working with them directly, making sure that they understood that we were all on the same team and that we were trying to not increase their workload, but you know, change the way they're thinking about things when it comes to sustainability. It's not meant to be additional work. It's meant to be, you know, more collaborative work and, you know, much more efficient. And, you know, I think that that really changed their minds a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. The efficiency part, you know, like understanding that it's not just a benefit for something abstract, but something they'll be able to experience every day. Like, and if you go on our website, there's a great spotlight about the University of Washington and their program getting input, and also in using a kind of mini bin, a mini max program over there. So that was really interesting. All right, last question. This one is about kind of the structure, since you've been in the facilities and the sustainability side. Like, what are the pros and cons of having recycling, zero waste located in facilities or the Office of Sustainability, where those decisions are made, where those programs are planned out? In your experience, what worked better in your opinion?
Great question. So it's kind of a tough question, though. I think there's some pros and cons to both. I think some of the challenges, I'll kind of start there with having the different offices. So, you know, especially a lot of us old recyclers and old kind of recycling education folks, you know, doing this work for a long time, and then new sustainability officers are created. And in some ways, I think a lot of the credit, because the stories are being told more, a lot of the credit for some of this stuff are really kind of highlights of some of these programs have happened more recently through sustainability and through communications efforts. But that work's been being done for a while, so it makes it a little bit difficult between the two offices. I do ultimately feel like, after participating in all these transitions, though, like, I would appreciate so much more, I think, all of those programs being under the umbrella of sustainability. Personally, I think it would work better for our campus. You know, we've done a really great job with the development of this leadership team, but I've always told people a lot. I kind of went from, in my own role in facilities, to the role in sustainability, to a position of accountability with no authority. And so that can be really difficult. And so a lot of times when I think about trying to move the needle around these programs, I think to myself, it would be really great if we could just manage, you know, all of composting, or if we can manage all of waste reduction and recycling. And so if you have the opportunity to have it under that sustainability umbrella and still be able to really focus more on that holistic visionary approach as well as the operations, I think ultimately, in my opinion, that would be the best scenario. This is kind of next best thing for us, because we have really developed a great communication and collaborative efforts with these different areas, but it would be much more effective all under one umbrella. It may be a little bit quicker to move the needle.
I understand. All right, thank you, Jen. Thank you for all the questions, everyone. Jen will be able to answer a few directly in the chat, but also this email is here is Jen's. if you want to reach out and talk to Jen more specifically and more in depth maybe about App State's program. Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right, everyone. Coming up next, we're going to introduce our next speaker from UC San Francisco, Daniel Chow. In 2011, Daniel joined UCSF in the Recycling and Waste Reduction Program. He helped create the sorting program to target high contamination at UCSF and various other programs that help increase the diversion rate. Along with increasing recycling and composting, the focus has always been on reducing waste or finding new avenues for reusing items. Daniel also likes to visit national parks with his wife for hiking and photography. They have visited 41 out of the 63 national parks so far. Welcome, Daniel.
Great, thanks for the introduction, Eric. Let me share my screen. All right, so thank you for joining us today. And I'll talk about our operations and custodial programs and the waste program, and pretty much planning and operation. So just some background for UCSF. For anyone that's not familiar with UCSF, we are part of the UC system, University of California's system, and we are the only school in that system that is primarily graduates. So we have no undergrads. We're also known for our hospital, but for everything that I'm talking about under my purview is really just on the campus side. So everything that is research, education, and administration. And you can see from our breakdown here, our population is about 30,000 people, but we have a very small amount of students and postdoc, which is only 6,000. Our program, Recycling Waste Reduction Program, we are here for providing consistent, efficient, and user-friendly services for UCSF students, staff, and faculty, essentially making anything that's waste-related easy to understand, right? Our scope is managing all the solid waste for the campus, implementing solutions to help reduce costs, and reducing landfill. So our goal, before 2020 was to reach zero waste, so which is 90% diversion rate. At 2020, we reached 78%, which is 12% away from our goal. So even though we did not meet it, it was still an accomplishment to get to that point. You can see over the past 14 years, we've had a gradual increase up to our 2020 plateau. And of course, in 2021, we took a little bit of a step back because of COVID, right? There's a lot of challenges that came along with that that helped, that kind of slowed our progress. But looking beyond 2020, the UC system has a goal of reducing total waste per capita. So compared to the 2015, 2016 levels, right? So by 2025, it's a 25% reduction. By 2030, it's a 50% reduction. We are currently on pace to meet those. And by looking at the graph, you can kind of see that our landfill amounts have been slowly decreasing. Same thing with our recycling compost. We've been really trying to reduce the amount of waste that we're generating. And in that orange is reuse. So we've been really ramping up a lot of our reuse, whether it's from donations, sales, repurposing on campus to help kind of meet these goals. And if you look closely at the graph, you can see in 2021, we had an uptick in landfill, but like I said, that's kind of due to COVID. So it's a little bit of a, hopefully an outlier year. And as our campus has been reducing waste, the black line on our chart here is also showing that our population has been steadily increasing. I would ignore that 2021 jump in our increase because our calculations have been a little off due to people not coming on campus. But in general, we are still a growing campus. So this is kind of like the bread and butter of our program, the main focus, which is sorting and consolidation. We started this in 2015 with a city grant, with a grant from the city of San Francisco, and we reduced our landfill tonnage by 900 tons in that first year. In addition to this, to reducing the tonnage, we also saved over $100,000 a year just by sorting and consolidating. We are now utilizing an app to help collect all the data from my team of sorters. I have 4 sorters that work at various high generating buildings at UCSF. And while they're sorting, they're logging, capturing all the data into the app. And that helps us look at some metrics and data to see how we can target certain buildings of what kinds of materials that they are generating that we can focus to help improve diversion. So this is an image of one of our older sorting styles. So I would point out that this is not current, because in current days, we're obviously covered more PPE, we are wearing masks. So this is an old photo of pre-pandemic. Typically it's just a table. We have various bins that are now color coded that helps the sorters separate the landfill bags that they have and clean up the recycling and compost. Our grant with the city was so successful that they actually modeled, we were told that they modeled this ordinance off of our grant. So the city of San Francisco now has a new ordinance that was enacted July 1st of 2019, where any large account or any large generator that generates more than 40 cubic yards of waste per week or has a compactor, they will be audited for all 3 of their waste streams. And you can see here the levels of allowable contamination are pretty low for everyone that's familiar with the waste field, right? So the compost, no more than 5% contamination, no more than 10% in the recycling, and no more than 25% contamination in the garbage. So contamination in that sense is any kind of recycling, any kind of compost. And if we go beyond that, the city may force that entity or that account to hire a zero waste facilitator, which is just a fancy name of saying you're being forced to hire a sorter. And if you don't hire a sorter, you may be faced up to fines of $1,000 per day. And I think this really helps sell the program because a lot of our properties don't want to face these challenges, right? So my team is always looking at areas where we can improve contamination to help offset these potential charges. And I think like what Jennifer kind of mentioned, centralized waste disposal. I do think UCSF was maybe a little late to the game, right? But we had been servicing desk side containers, cubicles, mainly every day and occasionally weekly in certain buildings. And during the pandemic, we saw that as a good opportune time to implement a centralized waste disposal. So this was a partner with custodial services to roll out this program, where the custodians are essentially no longer servicing individual cubicles or offices. And those who are at cubicles or offices, they must bring their waste to centralized locations, which typically are break rooms, kitchens, high traffic areas, where we have larger containers for them to use. At those centralized waste disposal areas, they have the opportunity to sort out their waste, because at their desk or cubicle, traditionally you just have a garbage or a recycle bin with a garbage caddy. So that provides you no options for separating your compost. And a lot of times, if you have something that's a little messy, they're just going to put in the garbage. But when you're going to these centralized streams, you have the opportunity to separate your waste into the proper streams. And with custodial implemented this change, they moved 75% of their staff from the nighttime to daytime. And with a centralized waste disposal, it also helps reduce injuries because of the staff not having to do the repetitive motion of, bending down and picking up a container upwards of 100 times per day. And with the reduction of the service, we've been able to pivot towards cleaning, to focus more on cleaning, because with the pandemic and COVID-19 cleaning guidelines, we've had to really up our time spending on sanitation, right? And we weren't able to hire more staff because our budgets were very limited. So this was a way to, without cutting back on staff, be able to cut back on a certain service that may have not been necessary and put a focus on what is needed during the pandemic. Working with custodial, we also implemented a SOP, right? A standard operating procedure, where we wrote this document where they can follow the guidelines on how to dispose of the waste properly after they collect it in the building. So with my program, I'm always looking at how the waste is collected and taken by our waste hauler, right? So, ensuring that the custodians are doing it correctly. They're the last mile delivery, right? If everyone sorts it properly, but the custodian is not properly trained to put the waste into certain bins, then all the work of the individuals in that building was put to waste, right? So with the SOP, every new custodian goes through the many documents that they have, and how to dispose of waste is just as important as any of their other tasks. We're also working on creating annual trainings so all custodians can learn how to do this, even if it's not part of the route, but they may be pulled in from other areas when people are out to fill in. So it's really integral to our program that we have buy-in from our custodial staff. And along the same lines, waste bin standards. At UCSF, we have, we're very decentralized in a way where all of our buildings are they're built to different standards. They're different looks, different locations, and there is no great standard that the designs can be looked at, right? It's very outdated, and I'm actually working on. I actually had a meeting today with one of the design teams to really put these standards that I want for UCSF in, because when we get a new building, a new setup that isn't properly, it's not adequate, whether it's in size, signage, color, it really messes with our program, because then the individuals are not used to it, or they're not going to learn how to sort and separate their waste. So these standards, we went through and we're trying to get all these in. So for this one here is orientation, color, right? So we want the same orientation. Ignore the photo on the right, because that's just a picture of the bins on the street. But in general, like our big belly sets on the bottom left, we're always looking at recycle on the left, garbage in the center, compost on the right? So it helps build that sense that if someone's walking up to it, if they're always used to the bin on a certain side, we're trying to encourage that repetitive motion. And obviously the colors, black for garbage, blue for recycle, green for compost. Sizes, right? So a lot of our sizes that we offer, we negotiate into our contract to get certain bins for free, or a certain price for a certain bin. So having the design team utilize these sizes will help us, in terms of having the right bins into the cutouts, and also having our custodial staff ordering the right size, right? We don't want a 50-gallon bin and a 20-gallon bin. And if there's too many variations, we're spending extra money on liners that are just not needed. So being able to dwindle down to, really just 3 sizes here: the Slim Jims, the 23 gallons, the mediums, we call them tall mediums, but they're 10 gallons, and the 7-gallon mediums. So those are our 3 key sizes that our custodial team uses. Open bins. So here's an example, like on the right side, bins was just an afterthought here, right? So, there's no place to put a signage, and, people are tossing it to whatever is easiest or whatever they recall. And, in many jurisdictions, you may have a specific way to sort at your work, but when you go home, it may be different. And that's definitely the case in San Francisco and the Bay Area. So we're always looking at areas that we can have bins with proper signage at eye level. So if someone is going up there, they have the opportunity to look and sort their waste properly. So this one's really on signage, right? So having key signage in the correct orientation is really important, right? So on the right side is one of our newer containers where we're exploring with digital signage, something with widgets that are moving, stuff that we can update remotely, and having that option really gives us some flexibility. So if an event is coming in, or if we get a new vendor on site, we can always change those images to what they are physically holding, right? So a lot of people, I've watched many people go up to bins and think about, how do I sort and separate waste? And if they don't see their item matching on the display, they just don't know what to do. So just having that image is really important. Also at the bottom photo in the middle, there's, in San Francisco, we have commingled recycling, right? So we always ask that all 3 bins are equal size, equal access, equal openings. In that bin that was ordered, you can see no space for signage, no color coding, and also different sizes. So it really hinders the users from putting, if they want to recycle something that's a little larger and they can't, they have no option to put in the garbage on the left side. And 2-stream versus 3-streams. A lot of our build outs, they're not thinking for all 3 streams. So in the right and the center photo, one of the bins just have to sit outside, and it makes it quite ugly in a way, because it's just a different setup. So ensuring that we're working with our design team to think of these ahead of time is really important. And countertop openings is the last one I'll talk about. On the left side, it gives an option, no signage, right? But at least it gives option for a user to pull out the bins. But on the right side, they lock all the bins. So if you have a big to-go box, you can't fit in the opening, someone's gonna have to break it apart to fit it in, or they may just leave it on the counter. So a lot of times, if we don't work with the designers, we're, custodial, and my team will always be the ones there cleaning it up. Some of our UCSF campaigns that we've run, we really focus on, very key messages. Compost is the highest one, because in our landfill, we still find a lot of compostables, a lot of food waste, a lot of paper towels, napkins. So going through digital media, on-site signage, or printouts have really helped. On the bottom right, we used to put these little tabletop signages for the eateries of, whatever that they're using when they're sitting there eating. It would give them a very clear direction on how to dispose of their waste. And finally, these are just some more of our campaigns that we've been trying to just promote, right? I think, for waste, it's always kind of like an afterthought, because you don't think about it until you are finished using the product, right? So we've been really trying to put the word out there, just be mindful, right? Just that of what you are buying, and how to dispose of items, right? So our big bellies on the right, we put our signages there. These are some of our digital signages that we put around the campus. And this was, of course, for our 2020 goal, which we were making a big rush to try to reach. But we were able to kind of fine tune them for any need going forward. And that's the end of my presentation. And just leaving you a photo of here from my last trip to the Dakotas. Yeah, Eric, so we can move on to the Q&A.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Daniel. This first question is, does UCSF contract out your custodial services? And if so, how are you able to integrate the waste reduction into contracts?
Yeah, so UCSF, we do not contract any custodial services. I can say even a couple of years ago, we definitely did contract some of it. And that had always been an issue, because you would always have contractors that are coming in from different companies and all over the place, and they're not following standards, right? And with most of our custodians, which are union staff, that also created a little bit of a divide between full-time staff and we're bringing in contractors to do certain work. So we've actually transitioned over the past year and a half to full-time union staff in our custodial area. So we're not even allowed to use contractors. So that's why a lot of times the custodian will be pulled from one area to another to fill in instead of, someone picking up a phone and just calling up a vendor.
Gotcha. And how does the waste standards and the collection standards that you mentioned and you developed, how does that impact the training requirements or process for all the staff doing the collection?
Yeah, so at our custodial program, they recently hired someone that is just focused on training and safety for the custodial staff. The custodial staff, it's 200 plus custodians on site, so it's a lot of people there. And what we've always seen is an inconsistency of how they are all trained, right? Because if you work on a certain campus, you're used to doing it a certain way, or you have a different supervisor. That new trainer that we hired is there to really put everything on an even level playing field. So everyone is properly trained in the same way. So the processes are the same no matter where you go.
Gotcha. And the app that you mentioned before, what metrics was that app tracking for you? And is it used by the custodians, people outside those sorters that you talked about?
Yeah. So the app we use is called Zabble Zero. And we use that to collect waste while we're sorting. I'm familiar with that platform being used by custodians by other entities, but for our use, it's easier for my team of sorters to kind of go in there and use it to document and collect information that's coming out of the buildings. And that really has to be, it comes with some of the challenges we have with our custodial team because it's such a large staff. And they don't always have the same access to different types of devices, right? So it is a mobile app that has, you definitely have to learn how to use it, right? But after we collect all the data, I'm always looking at it to see how certain buildings are doing. If we see trends on certain items that we're seeing more in the garbage or notice, certain contamination. It's really collecting anything that is found in the garbage coming out of those key buildings.
And then final couple questions. People are curious about your SOP that you developed. People would love to see it, check it out if you're willing to share that. And in the chat, maybe you can send the name of that app. And then also people are really curious about those digital bins that you showed us earlier. So the ones with the screens behind them, people are curious about where y'all got those. So thank you so much again, Daniel.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. And feel free to contact me afterwards and just those key, I'll just go over real quick and I'll put it in the chat, but the bins are Evil Eco. So it's a fairly new company that comes with, the very nice monitors that you can remotely control. And Eric, I'm blanking on the other one the SOP. Yeah, so I can definitely share that. If you reach out to me, I'm more than happy to share that document with you. And I'll put the app name in the chat too.
Okay, appreciate it so much.
All right, thank you.
All right, everybody. Before we go, I wanted to talk to you about the upcoming things that CURC has scheduled for you. The big one is CURC's annual workshop. This year, the workshop will focus on what connections we can cultivate for a just and zero waste future. The program will be a series of presentations on different ways we can collaborate with each other. So we'll have 4 different themes on that kind of collaboration. The first is connecting our waste programs with the needs and experiences of campuses by POC and marginalized communities. Also connecting with our city or local government on waste reduction and diversion. Connecting with community groups working on the health and environmental justice impacts of waste, connecting with our regional colleagues for mutual sharing of strategies and resources. The last hour of the workshop will also involve breakout sessions along that vein by region to discuss opportunities for collaboration with each other, with different colleagues in your area, and that's at no additional cost to you. The regional breakouts that are currently being offered are New England, Mid-Atlantic, the Southeast of the United States, and the Midwest, from Ohio to Iowa. All those details are on the registration for the workshop that you can check out. If you didn't hear your region listed and want to host an informal Zoom meeting, you can email us at curc3r@gmail.com. Registration is required and the cost is $25. However, we do not want anyone to feel excluded from this workshop due to an inability to pay. If you need financial assistance, please also email us at curc3r@gmail.com. The workshop will be conducted via Zoom, and a Zoom link will be sent out to all registered participants close to that workshop date. And in addition, the webinar series will continue. So if you enjoyed what you're seeing today, check out these upcoming programs: integrating reduction and reuse into messaging in October, and diversion upstream for December 16th. In an effort to make sure a variety of our different members are represented in the webinars, we have created a form for you to submit if you want to speak on a webinar, if you want to share your campus story, what your campus is up to. So if you're interested in the October webinar, please submit that as soon as possible, but also in December, we'd love to see your proposals, see what you can share with the rest of CURC. You can find a link to that form in the post-webinar survey on our website or in the chat, which Rob has sent along to us. So make sure you check out both of those, the workshop and the webinar. We'd love to see you in the future. And once you leave the webinar today, you will be prompted to take a very quick survey about your experience with the presentation. Please share your thoughts with us so we can improve our webinars moving forward. And don't forget to submit interest forms to speak on the future webinars. And of course, register for our workshop coming up in September. So one last time, join me in thanking Daniel and Jen for their presentations and all their hard work. We're so happy to have hosted them. And you can look for their presentations and a recording of the program on the CURC website at curc3r.org within the next day or so. So thank you so much. Have a good afternoon, and thank you so much for coming.